All right, good afternoon. I would like to call the meeting of the Maple Run Unified School District Board of Directors for October 12th to order. It is 6 p.m. We've established that we have a quorum. And right now, we're waiting for Joanna to come on remotely and for Nina to arrive on site. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what I believe.
Okay. So the next item on the agenda is the agenda review. Are there any reasons to move any of the items on the agenda as far as anyone there knows?
I see no.
Hearing none. Hearing none, we'll accept the agenda as presented. Please rise and join me for a pledge of allegiance to the flag. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States
of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, next item on the agenda is the visitor section. Does anyone know if we have any visitors present who wish to be heard?
We don't have anyone here in the room that is visitor.
Okay, no one in the room, no one popping up on the chat.
We have one visitor on the chat, but I don't know if they would like to speak. So John just put up the announcement.
Okay, we'll give it a minute. All right, well, since I'm not hearing anything from the visitor, I'm going to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the consent agenda. There are 3 items on the consent agenda: the approval of minutes, the media packet, and the staff changes. Anyone need to pull anything out to discuss independently? Hearing none, we'll approve the consent agenda. Moving on to item 6, reports to the board. First item is the student board representative report. Bill, do we have anyone there or any information related to the student report?
Yes, Sarah and Maura. I want to make sure I say Maura correctly. Their names. They're both here today.
Hi.
Hi.
So great to be here. Yeah, so school's obviously back. We've been here since then. Powder Puff happened about 2 weeks ago, and we still don't know how much we've made yet, but there were a lot of people, so it seems like we did well. Homecoming happened. We had Spirit Week, so students were really excited about that. It was a lot of fun. Fall sports will be coming to a close soon. There are playoffs coming up, which is exciting and a little nerve-wracking for people. Tickets for the Addams Family are on sale right now. That's our musical that we're doing. I can't remember which weekend it is, but it is in November. Social Justice Club went to the State House last week, I believe, or 2 weeks ago, for an event that they had. Robotics Club is starting up, and Student Council had voting for the positions.
Interact Club is working on maintaining their outdoor classroom, so potting plants and building tables. Ada's Closet is also being organized right now. There was a cereal drive during homecoming week. National Honor Society just had their induction. There's a football game Friday that we're looking forward to. There was homecoming and Spirit Week. There was a pep rally. The seniors won. We're juniors, but it's fine. Got it next year. And there's a band concert November 9th.
I also want to add that our particular group has received $10,000 to do a project with students. So we're currently trying to get feedback from other students from the whole school to work on the project.
Was it a grant? Or?
I believe it was.
It was a gift / donation, right?
Yeah.
Right, Mr. Blanchard?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was Yeah, very gracious gift done to the students to be able to implement some change in school. So the student voice committee created a QR coded document so every single student can give his or her suggestion, and then the group will take a look at which one or ones happen to be best. So it's also possible to receive $5,000 for the coming years depending upon the project. So they're really just in the early stages of it, but it's a great opportunity for these students to actually do meaningful change with some money behind it.
Thank you.
I have another question. What's the Interact Club?
The Interact Club is organized by Ms. Hodgman, I believe. And it's mostly like community service. We do a lot of projects just like in the school.
It's affiliated, it's a
Rotary.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, that's exactly where I was gonna go prior. It's a student version of Rotary. It is through Rotary International. There's a lot of support. They were just down presenting last Tuesday. I couldn't be there, but they were presenting to Rotary about the work they've been doing. They do a lot of great work.
Excellent. Anyone have any questions for our students?
How's school going
Thank
so
you so
far?
much for your, oh, sorry. Apologize.
Right.
How's school going so far? Or like, how's the year going? How do kids feel in class?
I mean, junior year is definitely a tough one academically, but it's been really, really nice to feel a sense of normalcy. And I think there's a lot more school spirit, and like just the attendance has been a lot higher, which is nice. There's people in my classes. So yeah, it's been pretty good for me.
I also feel like last year there were a lot of like tired kids, especially in the morning, and I feel like especially with the 8:10 start now every day, like people seem to be more awake in class, and I think it's going pretty well.
Do you happen to know numbers for who's taking advantage of that, getting here later?
I don't.
Are the teachers
I know,
awake?
not expecting to. I'm sorry. That was,
The teachers
that was
are
an unfair
awake, yeah.
question.
They are,
Sorry.
mostly.
Okay. Was someone going to speak or?
I think we're all set now.
All set.
Okay. All right, thank you for that. And the next item on the agenda is the Proficiency Learning update. And I believe we have Holly, Sarah, and John who are prepared to speak to this.
Although admittedly, my part is very easy because it comes at the end and is very short. So I am, however, happy to introduce Sarah, who's the assistant principal here at BFA, but one of the assistant principals at Poly, who's the instructional coach for BFA. If you give me 1 second, I'll get your slide up.
Do you want us at this mic or that mic, or
That's fine.
this is, okay.
I can do it.
Okay. Great. Hello. Good evening, everybody. So we've been asked to give a proficiency update from BFA. So what we decided to do was kind of give a little bit of context of what the proficiency-based learning is, a little bit of the background in proficiency-based learning for BFA, and then what we have already done and what the next steps are and what we're currently doing around proficiencies. So go ahead. So I know that some board members here are newer compared to back in 2019 when some of this had kind of hit the media and we started to need to work on things. So I wanted to include what proficiency-based learning is right here for you to read. Really the main premise of proficiency-based learning is rather than your learning being based on seat time, it's based on being able to fill in the gaps, to know that the material and the standards that you're learning, that you've had the amount of time that you need to be proficient, the instruction, the skills, the learning. in order to advance or go to the next level. So it's a more holistic system. It provides more equity in learning for students. And with proficiency-based learning, we find that we do need more supports and different types of supports for students in order for them to become fully proficient. The way I like to think about it is in the traditional system, you may get, an 80% in math, and then you move on to the next unit. But what happened to the other 20% that you didn't learn, that you didn't master? And then those gaps end up widening through time. So with focus on proficiency, we're focusing on making sure that those gaps are as small as they can be. So again, proficiencies include explicit, measurable learning objectives based on standards and measure a learner's knowledge and skill demonstrated in a consistent manner in various settings over time. So it may not be, like for example, in English class, there are 4 standards that you are learning every single year that you take English class, and each time you go through those standards, you're visiting them at a higher level. So you have a long time to meet the proficiency for your graduation requirement. Okay, so now that you have a review on what PBL is, I wanted to give a little background, and this is background on why we're having a proficiency update as well. In 2013, BFA started to transition to proficiency-based learning. Polly was here.
I was.
Do you want to talk about that transition a little bit?
It was dicey at best, I'll put it that way. So proficiencies came on scene, right? And so it was by the state, and it was a complete shift in the way we did things, right? So now instead of, for instance, we used to add participation and all the different aspects of what class looked like, and now it was being kind of stripped down to say, you focus on the skill. So when you hear that, that's actually a really good thing. But we didn't really know how, right, to really strip down education in that way. And every school was doing it differently, right? So you couldn't turn and say, well, how are you doing it? How are you doing it? Because everybody just kind of was doing it differently. So it was definitely a learning curve like no other. And so that's what was going on.
So BFA, along with all the other schools, were doing the best that they could with this really dramatic shift in education. And the expectation from the AOE was that the class of 2020 was going to graduate under the proficiency-based system, like fully, like they have done their whole high school career under proficiency-based learning, proficiency-based scoring and reporting, and so on. So come fall 2019, when we start looking at transcripts for students that are wanting to send their transcripts off to college, we found that there were some inconsistencies, there were problems with the proficiency transcripts, and there was a call for really an overhaul of our scoring and reporting system and really trying to be more consistent across the whole school. And so we needed to listen to what the community had to say, come up with some goals, and then do a lot of work in order to really make things work for our students, our community.
I would just like to say too, I as a teacher being here was so appreciative that the community actually gave direction, because we were almost in paralysis because we were working in these 2 different systems, right? We had this proficiency ideology and how we knew that it was good for kids, but we also had the system of credits and graduation, and so we had these 2 systems, and just trying to navigate the 2 was a little bit overwhelming. And so to get the feedback, this is what we need as a community to report so that we understand, I feel was helpful.
So some of the board members that were here at that time, raise your hand. Who were you? Okay. So you may remember that we had multiple board meetings where community members came and spoke. We had some students speak. We held community forums. Bill and I went into the PAC, and lots of parents came in. We did a question and answer session. We had nights with the Ask the Administration nights here in the library during parent-teacher conferences, where Bill and I were in here trying to really help community members kind of understand where we're going and get their feedback. We had these big pieces of paper, we were writing down what the priorities of the community were, and we really tried to synthesize that into what our goals were going to be. So these are the things that we needed to do according to the community. So proficiencies need to be better understood by everybody. We needed to be more transparent about how scores are assessed and calculated. So it sounds like we had a communication problem, right? Standardize the calculation.
Can whoever has the sound on over here? Is somebody on the room?
I think it was Nelda.
Okay, sorry.
She's getting two going.
Oh, she's got two.
Yeah, 'cause
Her
her
phone and her
was
computer.
almost-
Okay. Standardize the calculation method across the school. So that's really looking at rubrics and how we were scoring. One of the big issues was create a wider range of scores that receive a proficient score. So if you know, the previous proficiency scoring was 1, 2, 3, or 4. In order to pass a class, you had to have a 3, which left the entire student body within 1 point of each other when you're calculating what we call the proficiency average, but essentially the GPA. And so the community wanted kind of a wider variation on what could, gain credit and differentiate. So we'll get to that slide soon. And then making sure that our transcripts were going to clearly communicate student achievement to post-secondary institutions, colleges. Parents specifically over and over again said they wanted a letter grade, even though that is not traditionally how proficiency-based learning is scored. But because that's what we heard from the community, we wanted to make sure that we were kind of making a system that was going to work for our community, and it's a hybrid, and we're still doing proficiency-based learning and scoring and reporting kind of behind that letter grade. Okay, so that's kind of what they wanted to be able to hand to colleges. Okay, and then are you in alignment with Chittenden County Schools? And we had our department chairs really do some research around that. So that's what we heard. And then what we did. And so you can see I've kind of broken this up by year. We've done a lot of work. We did standardize the calculation. Department heads analyzed other schools around Chittenden County and the state to make sure that we were in alignment. That's how we kind of came around drafting the goals. We had lots of in-service and collaboration time, parent-student forums like I mentioned. We standardized the course syllabi across the school. We developed a school-wide scoring guide with a wider range of scores, translated standard grades into letter grades for final scores. We also hired an outside firm to look at our, for dynamic transcripts and live report cards so that parents could log into PowerSchool at any point and see what the report card was to increase communication, and complete an outside audit of PowerSchool because there were some inconsistencies in the way things were coded, and so we were able to get that fixed within the system. So this is an example of that scoring guide. This is the scoring guide. This is in the handbook. This is included in, what did we call it? The short one we did.
Oh, the playbook.
The playbook. This year we came out with a playbook, which is really a concise version of the student handbook that really gives the very important, pertinent information in a short, concise way for students and for parents.
And I appreciate it.
It's very nice, and it's in color. So that's been a good communication piece. One thing I want you to notice is that in the old system, 3 was proficient. That's where you had to get in order to receive credit, okay? With the new kind of variation of scores, we moved the credit bearing down to basic proficiency, allowing a student to be able to be at a level of proficiency and still gain that credit. So you can feel free to read that as some nighttime reading sometime. Maybe it'll keep you awake and get you excited. Maybe it'll put you to sleep. I'm not sure, but
Like, Sarah,
that's on our.
only you and I read this stuff. And
I
Paul.
love it. I love it too.
Okay.
Yeah.
And all the teachers.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, get
Yeah.
excited about this stuff.
Yes. This is the proficiency score to letter grade conversion that had been requested. And so this is showing you the proficiency score and how that translates to a letter grade. So anything below basically a C, the student does not get credit because they would not be at a proficient level in order to say that they finished that course successfully. So I wanted to give you an example of the transcript that we currently use. I don't have the old one to show you, but this one's prettier. You can take my word for it. It has your standard BFA classes on this side, on the left-hand side. And if a student transfers in, they would have their other school, wherever they transferred from. I wanted to show you the flexible pathways box at the top on the right-hand side. And that, along with proficiency-based learning, flexible pathways is a really vital component to that, where students are able to really choose their path of learning. Maybe it's not inside a traditional classroom. Maybe they are interested in forestry and they want to do some type of internship or something that's outside the classroom and still be able to gain credit for that. This student, you can see, has driver ed and some Vermont College classes on there as a flexible pathway for them to get more education and to get credits. And then it gives you the current year. Transferable skills are down below, and then you have your honors and recognitions at the bottom.
What's the CA? Is that credit approved?
Credit awarded.
Awarded.
Okay. Yes, so the other thing I want, oops, go back. This I will be mentioning later, but I did want to point out, see 10th grade PLP completion, 11th grade PLP completion. So that's something that we implemented in the last 2 years. The PLP, the Personalized Learning Plan, is also another vital component of the proficiency-based learning system. And that's supposed to be a place where students are really showing the evidence of their learning. It's also supposed to be a place where they can show what their passions and interests are, what their high school plan is, what their post-high school plan is, and a place for them to kind of put their, I guess, their wonderings, their achievements, all of those things, and kind of make it into a portfolio. It had been something that was really kind of a checklist, and we want it to be more meaningful for students. So during the pandemic, it was a hard thing to do. In the 1920 year, there was no PLP because COVID hit. The following year, we were able to get that PLP going, and now, which I'll mention a little bit more about the PLP later, but having it on the transcript is also another signal to students that this is actually something that matters to your education. It's just kind of one more layer. What we did in 2021, other than COVID, because that took a lot of our time, as you all know. Proficiency Instructional Coach. Why don't you describe what you do and why you came on?
So, as some of you know, I was an English teacher here for 17 years, and then, so I've been an instructional coach for the last 3 years. And so I made this shift because, as Sarah pointed out, in 2013, I was on scene, right? And I kind of understood when I said we didn't really know what to do. I understood that, you know, it's important to have somebody to help. And so when it became very apparent that, particularly through the scoring and reporting and coming up with the scale, that teachers need some coaching in how to pull this off effectively. So that's how I came to be. I made the switch over. Yeah.
So in addition to Polly coming on as an instructional coach, which is really needed and really great, I think all of the other schools in the district had coaches for a number of years before BFA got one. And so, and this year we're seeing even more of a pickup of teachers really wanting to meet with Polly for coaching cycles. We had a lot of targeted professional learning for staff, which Polly will talk about more. We clarified the handbook around PBL. We revamped the multiple opportunities and retake policy and increased communication. So the revamp on the multiple opportunities, it wasn't clear about the redos and the retakes and how a student can score and how many times can they do it. And so in the handbook, you'll find the wording for how we kind of were able to define it a little bit better, to give students multiple opportunities, but also to make sure that they're, doing the work that they need to do in order to practice to get that proficiency.
Okay, so professional learning. So you can see during the January in-service, we decided that teachers really need to take a look and almost do an audit of the assessments that they give to kids. And were these in fact aligned to the proficiency scale? Because we had just published this proficiency scale, and so we needed to make sure that they matched. And so during this in-service, teachers, everybody brought an assessment that they had, and they worked in groups, and they basically went through and found where did it align, where did it not align, and how could it align. And then they broke up into departments and looked at their own standards and say, is this still what we want as a standard for our content area? And so more of like just a revision and focus on whether that's true. We continued that same work in the PLCs. And so PLCs are a professional learning community, which I guess that is one thing that you implemented. And so that is where a group of teachers meet for a period of time, an hour after school, where they can collaboratively learn from each other. And so we continued that work in the PLC where they were looking at their assessments. Do they align to the proficiencies? Is it just a fun activity, or does it actually have a point? Right? There are so many teachers that are like, I love this unit, it's so fun, kids love it. And it's like, but is there a skill attached to it, right? And it was just really that focus, like what skill or what standard are they going to be able to take away after doing this? And so those conversations I felt were super powerful because, again, stripping down what you've always done to something very specific is sometimes hard. And so then we, in 3/26/21, we had in-service, and that is a focus of the context. And so if you happen to look at the proficiency scale, it references context. And basically, there's similar context, there's unique context, and new context. And so based on the proficiency scale, teachers needed some professional development about what does that mean. So we kind of dug into that proficiency scale and kind of tore it apart, and so people came away with a better understanding. And then I will speak to the new staff development. So in 2021, we had, I wouldn't say a lot, we had a couple new staff, maybe five.
5, 6.
And as an instructional coach, I kind of took them under my wing and said, they're coming into BFA, and as I just said, schools all over the state are doing proficiencies in very different ways. And so how can we ensure that the people coming into this building kind of have a common understanding so that when they go forward and teach their kids that they're kind of working off the same understanding? So I did that in 2021, and then this year we have 20 new teachers. It's a lot of new teachers. And so same thing, just reinforcing that they're getting the same information, they're looking at the scale in the same way, and so to kind of like build a better understanding, and that translates into scoring and reporting. Like if you're more comfortable with the scale, you'll know that when you give the kid a 3, what that means.
Yes. What else did we do in 21-22? So that was last year. Team leaders from each school started UDL, Universal Design for Learning training for leaders, because we were going to be implementing that this year, which we have started to implement that training for all teachers in BFA this year. We started district-wide curriculum and standards alignment with all departments, and that is ongoing, and John's going to be talking more specifically about that right after this. Okay, so you'll get more of that. Common local assessments is something that was identified by those curriculum committees that we needed some more common local assessments, especially around English and math. And so we implemented the IXL diagnostics, which students are taking three times a year in order to show kind of the benchmark of where students are starting. It breaks it down into what areas they need improvement so that those proficiencies can be targeted in the teacher's instruction, be able to really differentiate for each student on what they need. The personal learning plan, like I mentioned earlier, the committee developed a new PLP template and process for the 9th and 10th grade beginning this fall. So the 11th and 12th graders, these lovely ladies here, they have the old template because they've been doing that now for a few years. They're familiar with it, they're comfortable. We weren't going to change it up on them again. They've already gone through a lot of change in their high school years. But for the incoming 9th graders and for the 10th graders, there's actually a brand new Google site. So every student has their own website. And in that website, there's kind of all of the requirements for their PLP. For the 9th grade year, it's linked to their global citizenship class. We wanted to make sure that we're linking their learning, something that's really practical, global citizenship, into showing what their evidence of learning is and how that relates to their life later on. And for the 10th graders, it is linked to their career exploration class, where they are going to have their career path, a resume, and really doing some research on kind of what's out there for careers. So that's linked to that class. This year, the committee is coming together and coming up with a plan for the 11th and 12th graders, which will be something like a capstone project or a culmination planning in the 11th grade year and then presenting in the 12th grade year. Our MTSS system, which is multi-tiered systems of support, we overhauled that system, streamlined the process, increased the number of supports we have in the school, and we also revamped our period of support, which is something that many of our students who need an educational support plan, that's a Tier 2 support class that they go to, and we revamped kind of how that works. And then, of course, proficiency resources. Polly created a shared drive for easy access to rubrics and PBL tools, so that it's easier for teachers to really access that material instead of, I'm sure all of you have Google Drives that are a little bit messier than they need to be. So really getting that all in one place. Here we are this year. So the core component of UDL is standard and proficiency-driven curricula. The entire BFA staff and also other schools, all of the schools in the district are embarking on the UDL journey. The professional staff are participating in a 30-hour UDL training course, and that corresponds with the professional learning communities that Polly was mentioning earlier. So each of the modules, after the teachers complete that, they meet with their PLCs to discuss, and there's a protocol that they go through to really bounce ideas and ask questions and reinforce their learning. And then the ESPs, educational support, are participating in a 10-hour UDL micro course. So we're really trying to make sure that everyone who has contact with students is proficient in UDL. Okay. Again, the BFA playbook was this year. We had our first parent training session just last week during our parent information night, trying to really make that more accessible for parents. Continued support on scoring and reporting practices through PLCs and faculty meetings and coaching. Panorama is a database that streamlines the use of our data. IXL, those common local assessments I was talking about, actually get pulled into Panorama so that when we click on a student, we're actually able to see everything from attendance to behavior to their standards to their scores on the SBAC and on the IXL, so that when we're looking on how to support a student, we have a whole student picture right there on one screen. So we are implementing Panorama right now with our MTSS team, and we'll have a more broad implementation kind of after we figure out how it all works, and then have the rest of the staff get in there. Something that is coming up is we need to, this year, look at transferable skills and really revamping the rubrics around that and putting a little more focus on that. And then, like I mentioned, PLP templates will be developed this year as well for 11th and 12th grade. This is a little bit of a side note, but very tucked into all of this. In 2020, we hired a math interventionist to focus on targeted instruction for freshmen who came into BFA 2 grade levels or below in their math skills, and that's by looking at test scores and also by teacher recommendation from the elementary schools. In 2022, this year, we added a second math interventionist because the need is there, and also a literacy interventionist to work with students on targeted proficiencies. So those are small class sizes with really more individualized targeted instruction and supports for students. You want to talk about this?
Sure.
Okay.
Act 173, so as I'm sure you've heard a lot about Act 173 and the legislation around that, but basically how this aligns to proficiency-based learning is kind of that UDL component, that there has to be some kind of universal instruction for all kids. And if it's based off the standard that they're learning, it just is more accessible, I guess. Yeah. And the fact that there's that common comprehensive assessment system, we just talked about the IXL. It's so you can have data points, so you can actually look at how your kids are progressing.
So I wanted to show you this because this went into play officially in July of this year, okay? And I want you to see all of the things that are in Act 173 that we are already working on here at BFA within the district, right? And so we're on the right track. We've been working for a few years now on kind of implementing these things. And with Act 173, it's showing us that, okay, we're really on the right track. We're going in the right direction. The restorative practices is also something that the district is working on training. I already attended a couple days of restorative practice training as well. So I just wanted to put that in there to show you kind of the big picture too when it comes to the state and the small picture when it comes to BFA. This is my last slide. I added this one in here because I wanted to show you how UDL attaches to our district plan. So this is the plan that, Bill, what year was it? Was it 21?
2021.
2021. All the schools, came up with what their district plan was going to be and what were the core elements on what we needed to do as a district. And we had these 3 elements: social emotional learning, we had engagement, we had academics really in the center of what our plan was going to be. And UDL fits right in the middle of all of that, which is what our teachers are getting trained in. And you can see kind of all of the items on the side, I'm not going to read all of them, that flow into what we're trying to do as a district. And we've had a lot more cooperation across schools. We've had a lot more meetings, with the high school teachers and elementary teachers and the administration, and we're trying to talk a lot more and really get on the same page. And some of our next steps are really standardizing things like scoring and reporting across the district. And John's going to talk more about that. So thank you very much. Do you have any questions? I have a thank you slide.
Come on, John.
Thank you.
I've got a couple questions. Number one, you have instructional coaches. What particular training do the instructional coaches have above and beyond the normal teacher's training?
So I actually took twice. And it's called the Instructional Coaching Academy, and it's actually led by Ellen Dorsey, who's an instructional coach from Washington Central. Amazing. So I took that course the first year.
Champlain Valley Educators Consortium.
CVEDC, yeah. And then we sent a cohort of other instructional coaches from across the district the next year, so that we could kind of learn as a group. So that's basically
That's a good answer, thank you.
Yeah,
No, thank you very much.
Yeah.
My other one is, as you were talking about the people, there's a kind of a role there. I see the principal, the assistant principal, and then there's team leaders, coaches, department heads. How does everyone operate without bumping into each other?
No, exactly. So I'm I'm the only instructional coach so I get to drive my own ship, I guess. But yeah, we just sent out a flow chart too, and the fact that, kind of people have their designated roles. It did take 2 years for people to say, like, what is exactly that you do?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why when Sarah talked about this year, we're really seeing a lot of people reaching out. It's because they figured out what exactly coaching is and kind of what I do around proficiencies. Yeah, I feel that's a good question, yeah.
So we've actually kind of revamped, starting this year, our leadership structure as well. So if you will, if you can picture a flow chart, we have Brett Blanchard, principal, here, okay? And then we have the assistant principals here, okay? Heather Fitzgibbons is focused on student engagement, okay? And I'm focused on curriculum.
Right.
And of course, we cross over a lot because she also is responsible for different departments, and I help with student behaviors and HHVs and stuff like that, right? But along with Heather Fitzgibbons, we have the Dean of Students, okay, Mark Ginsberg. So they're kind of like that half of the equation. Then we have Sarah Katam, curriculum, and Polly Rico, instructional coach. So we're kind of the team on that side, right? And then Heather and I and Brett then oversee the programs. And we have, is it 8 program leaders? Ish?
Yes.
Yes. So for example, English and World Languages is one program, so they have a program leader. And math has a program leader, etc. We get together at least once a month to really look at the school, the system, make decisions, process, and then they meet with the people in their programs or departments. Yeah, so that's how it hashes out.
I think I need a flow chart.
Yeah, exactly.
So thank you.
Yeah.
I do just want to jump in. You were too quick for me,
Sure.
Peter. But when we think about the instructional coaches, what we really look for in that role is the master teacher, right? And so when you see Polly or you see like Helen Lanthier from SATEC or any of the other instructional coaches, they have a real deep well of knowledge, both as in the craft of teaching, but in usually a particular content area. So Polly with literacy, or if you see Kyle Ashton over at City School or Tammy over at Town School, they're math instructional coaches.
Right.
And then there's specialized training, like Polly mentioned, that we've made sure all the coaches have gone through together, and then we work actually as part of a district coaching team on defining that coaching model and making sure that teachers know how to access it, and that we get feedback and improve the model as we go as well. So.
And she's not evaluative, so she's not an administrator.
Right.
So teachers can have that relationship with her and say, I'm really having trouble with this, kind of without that weird, you supervise me feeling, right?
Is the world too complicated right now that we can expect a person to graduate with a teaching degree and be able to teach?
Yes.
Yeah, there's
I will say this, and I would want to parking lot it pretty quickly, but the pre-service programs are not giving us employees that have what we need.
Okay.
We could use a month to 2 months in the summer before our employee comes. Then we put them in the classroom. They do not have it. There is not a pre-service program that does it.
And is that because of them, what
College
they've
is
learned,
not-
or because of what
College
we're
is not
requiring?
keeping up with what we're trying to do at the K-12.
Thank you.
Okay, so that really leads to my question. I first want to compliment both of you. That was a fantastic overview. I think you did a fantastic job, and I really appreciate that. The question I have is, what concerned parents a few years ago was that the transcript did not interface with what colleges were expecting to see, because colleges are 18,000 years behind what high schools are doing. They're great at their own subjects and all that stuff, but in what they're expecting to see on a high school transcript is in the 1800s. So how are you feeling when you talk to guidance counselors and who are interacting with colleges, the colleges understand what you guys are doing.
I'll
And
let
what the
you-
transcript.
But I'll let you think for a second before you answer that, because I will just say one thing that is interesting. The curriculum directors from our region of Vermont met recently, and this very topic came up. And the reality is that states are forcing the hand of colleges across the country now. So we have 18 states that currently require public school, high school students to graduate with some form of proficiency-based transcript. And so it's really reached a tipping point where any of those last holdouts that really were not receptive to those proficiency-based transcripts really don't have an option if they want to accept students from some of the most populous states in the country. So we're in good stead in that regard right now, and that's really feeding this movement across the country. You have places like the Mastery Consortium that have taken off with some of the most elite private schools across the country, and helping them do the work that states and public schools have led the way in now. But that was really just an aside to your question. I know that you have more specific.
So based on community feedback, they wanted a more traditional looking transcript, and that's what they got. So there are letter grades, there is a GPA. So it looks very much like a traditional transcript, even though the education they received was proficiency-based.
And my understanding is that also colleges we needed to have a letter grade for the colleges. That was my understanding when we went
Yeah,
through
so
this,
I need to get
the
into,
fall.
I would normally be quiet because
Yeah.
this is not my role as superintendent, but since I was in this in 2019 and 20 and working with Sarah to lead this change, that perception was wrong then, is still wrong today. A letter grade is not needed. That was done for the community. I want to be really clear. We made that really clear then. We heard the community. We're doing it for the community. Every college at that point and still today says we don't need that. They'll show narrative transcripts that they can enroll kids by. The thing that was missing that wasn't on there that was critical, and it's really true for merit scholarships, is the GPA. A GPA has to be there. And that's one of the things I know when I came in, Sarah and I started working on this and saw this, was like, there wasn't going to be a GPA. And I was like, we're going to not let BFA students have a chance at merit scholarships. We can't do that. We must do that. We have to support our kids. So it's a GPA.
So getting back to that, so I kind of have a question about that. In terms of it seems like the philosophy has changed a little bit in terms of the number of times you can do a retake or a redo, and that everyone used to be able to do it, and now it's only, if you already have a 3.0, you're not going to be allowed to redo. Seems like that philosophy has changed.
Well, yes and no. I think the clarity around it has changed. So we have always kind of said this idea of multiple opportunities, right? And so, so speaking with an English hat, I have what's called a spiraling curriculum. So I hit the same standards all year long. Reading, and my book's going to change. We're writing, right? And so because I have all of these multiple opportunities, I might not have the same retake agenda that somebody with math who has like a unit, and then once they're done the unit, they're moving on, right? And so I think what happened, that's kind of always been the case around retakes, but around the clarity of understanding assessment has helped. That idea of you have to offer multiple opportunities. Is that you're going to keep hitting the same standard, or is it you're going to allow them to retake the test? Is that
Up to proficiency.
Up to proficiency.
And help me understand why you would encourage the students that maybe want to go beyond that to also redo.
Well, so that's where the multiple opportunities comes from, right? In the fact that, like let's see, if you retake the same test, right? So you have students who say, well, I'll just retake that, and then I'll just retake that, and just retake that, right? And kind of get in this cycle, opposed to, let me give you another learning opportunity and see how you perform. And that's where they can get up to the 4, instead of just taking the same test over and over and over.
So they're able to go past.
They
the
are able to go
proficiency.
past, but not retaking the same assessment over and over.
That would also work for like the mathematics and physics, where
Yeah.
it might be.
Exactly.
And with,
Yeah.
and in the complete handbook, it talks about trend scoring, because one of the concerns was, well, if they scored, you know, a 2 and a 2 and a 2.5, right, on their first attempts, but they end up at a 3.5 or a 3.8 by the end of the course, if you're averaging all of those together, is first of all, that's not the spirit of proficiency. And second of all, it's going to make their average lower than where they actually ended up at the end, right? So if you look at trend scoring, the teacher's looking at the trend and they're saying, okay, even though the average says this, by the end of the class, they're actually performing at a 3.5, they're proficient at a higher level, and so the teacher is able to then give that student a 3.5.
And what about like the zero? I'm probably talking way too much about this because I was way too involved in it when Sarah was graduating. What about the whole idea of averaging zeros in? Like,
So it's the same. So if there's a 0, it's because there is insufficient evidence of proficiency. And again, even if a student has missed a couple assignments, right? But by the end of the class, we're seeing that they're actually proficient in that standard to a certain level. It's not averaged in.
So
The
as long
average
as they
is the
don't get-
lowest score they can get.
so as long as it's not, as long as they don't miss assignments at the end of the semester.
If,
No?
well,
No,
it depends on the class, yeah.
So Susan, it's really understanding, you're still thinking with an average mind. You're thinking about. Trend is about, yeah, and my words aren't great.
No, I know.
You're thinking about averaging and how grades were done before. You've got to let that paradigm
Great,
go.
great.
It's about, and teachers were given the ability to look at what the trend is. And actually research shows that if they look at the overall performance of a student, they have the right to look at different metrics to call what the ending proficiency score was.
So what if you're looking at a kid who's just like, I've got soccer, I've got other stuff going on, but by the end, if I can prove that I know this, like, does that play into yours?
As a teacher, I always said a consistent demonstration.
Okay. Yep.
That's kind of where I went.
It's not one time.
It's not a one.
Right, they can't, like, at the end, like, hey.
Exactly.
A body of evidence is what we say.
Okay.
You have to have a body of evidence to
Correct.
show your proficiency.
Do you ever?
Also, if I can,
Hi, sorry, I'm not there. That's also where a student would get, it would be reflected in their transferable skills. So maybe the both of you could, explain that piece, right? So if the person shows their proficiency, that's where the 0 can get erased because it's not a law of averages, like Bill was saying, but they may get a lower percentage in transferable skills in terms of, getting their work done on a timely basis. So it's still reflected, it's just reflected differently.
I've got one more question. So this is general. I'm wondering what the feedback is from kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly from the business, industry, colleges is in terms of how our students are doing. Parents. So kind of once they leave BFA, do we have any? Do we have any feedback on?
So,
Well, yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say,
No.
I'm just gonna speak from my experience just in the community, right? Is what I'm hearing, which I think you've probably heard through the since COVID, is that our students need executive functioning skills. And so that SEL component, that bubble that we keep talking about, kind of like putting that a priority in schools, is because I think kids are lacking those particular, but as far as like writing and everything, like in like academics, I've heard nothing but positive. But it's the executive functioning, I feel like. So that's just me and my experience. Yeah.
And I would say if you look at what colleges are reporting about the students that have entered over the past 2 years, there's 2 major trends that they've been reporting on pretty consistently, nationally, statewide, and I'm sure the same will hold true for our students. And that is that in general, that executive functioning piece is huge, especially around attendance. And So you've seen some universities that are known for being super progressive have actually adopted very regressive attendance policies to try to reset attendance norms with students who've entered in the past 2 years. And then the other piece is really around dealing with adversity. There seems to be, or colleges are saying students when they come up against something that they're not immediately successful with, these last 2 cohorts that have come in, that it seems to be a little bit more of a struggle for them to work through that.
And we're even seeing that just within our students that we have right now, right? We've hired an additional social worker, we've hired an additional guidance counselor. The social emotional needs of the students are very high. There's a lot of anxiety. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So conversation kind of moved on, but
Yeah.
so
Sorry.
go back to a question I had. It kind of goes back to the average versus trend.
Yeah.
Do you encounter students that achieve a proficiency standard so early in a semester that they become disinterested later on or aren't challenged? Like, is that a risk with the proficiency-based or DBL?
I mean, yes, but I feel like that's, again, my job as an instructional coach is talking about how to move content in a kind of challenging way. And if you look at our proficiency scale, a 4, so that's a whole other philosophy, right? It's like, is it realistic for a kid to get a 4 in week 1 of school? Because if you look at our 4, it's really about that extension of learning. It's really about application of learning. It's really kind of deep. And so, so if you're really going to go by the scale, for a kid to really hit it out of the park in like week 1, month 1.
Sure.
But again, my job is to really always ask teachers, like, how are you getting that deeper thinking involved so that kids aren't bored when they get done?
Is that common?
I wouldn't say it's common.
Okay.
I wouldn't say it's common.
Is it common enough that you guys have systems in place to deal with it? Or is it
No.
more of an individualized basis?
It's more of an individualized basis, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say it's more of an individualized basis. Yeah.
And with UDL, okay, and with what we're doing with training with UDL, one of the things that it's really teaching teachers is how to give a menu of options for students to show their proficiency, okay? And so with that menu of options, there's also going to be some challenge by choice options in there, right? And so students are able to kind of take their learning to another level, show their proficiency in a new or unique way. And so as we move deeper into UDL, teaching and learning, I think that those, challenge by choice and boards of choice are going to help students be able to keep their interest high and keep motivated.
Nilda, you're muted.
Now I'm not. Okay, thank you so much. That was very incredibly comprehensive. And I think it's a really good example of how the teachers in the school took feedback from the community and used, basic evidence, educational evidence to try to make it work. Even though apparently we were quite average at it, according to Bill, it sounds like I'm very impressed with that report. I think it makes a lot of sense, and it helps me understand it because I remember living through it a little bit, but you kind of like wrapped it all up in a nice bow. So Polly, Sarah, and John, thank you so much for that. And obviously, if the board has additional questions for the team, you can reach out individually.
Joanna.
Or is Joanna has a question?
Yeah.
Okay, Joanna, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you. So Polly, one I think you've already answered is that, you were hired as the PBL instructor. So are you going to be weaving in UDL support for teachers? Are you going to be the person that's going to be the instructional coach for UDL for teachers?
Yeah,
as well?
Well, it's funny because I was hired, I guess my title is Proficiency Instructional Coach, but I feel like I'm an instructional coach, right? Yeah. In every sense of the word. So absolutely, yeah, the UDL. I've helped with creating those protocols for those PLCs around learning about UDL. So yeah, very much so.
Excellent, that's great.
Yeah.
My other question is, so again, fantastic presentation. Thank you so much. I think most of my questions were answered for sure. I did wonder, and I John kind of hinted at it as he said that he's spoken to some different universities and colleges to, you know, receive feedback from them about how our students are doing. And my question is, if you haven't already, are there plans to garner feedback from parents and students who have graduated or who are in the process of, just so we can, you know, get some, hear from that, you know, group as well. And my last question is, I think to Bill, I believe, if I'm asking it properly. And so this is all amazing work that BFA is doing on proficiency-based learning, but our true understanding of proficiency-based learning should be starting down in the preschool areas. And so I'm not looking for an answer this evening by any means, but I am interested to hear about how this is going to translate and intersect with middle schools, and then, you know, so on down the line, that we're not just stopping here, I guess, especially with PLPs and whatnot. Because it's great that they're being started in 9th grade, but my understanding is that that's something that would be started far earlier.
Yeah. So Joanna, I would let John answer that, but I kind of cut him off because I could see we were already at 7 o'clock.
Yeah. He
had planned to do that tonight, so I'll give him a minute just to respond to it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I would just say, I know we have additional reports to the board coming in the future about related topics. You probably remember from a year ago, we gave the presentation on the curriculum work that's happening across the district and the update on the envisioning plan that included SEL and the other components. Excuse me. The curriculum work, which you heard Sarah Pollock mention, focuses on identifying the common areas of instruction for all content areas at all grade levels across the district, the high leverage concepts, which are like the absolute guarantees at each level, and then assessment agreements that we're making across the district in common. That's that foundational work that has to happen before we further align reporting and proficiency for the other grades. And that work should wrap up towards the end of this year. And that really follows the same pathway or trend that BFA followed. Honestly, high school's going first by force of the state, right? But the rest of the district is engaged in that same foundational work as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you all. I think we can move on to the next item on the agenda, which I believe is Cole's business, implicit bias and anti-racism training.
Yeah, so I think that's, no, I just wanted to ask the board again, I asked you a couple meetings ago to really reach out to folks to invite them to the equity listening sessions, which we're teaming up with the goals subgroup and their work as well. We heard from about 56 people, around there, approximately 56 people, that they wanted to join. And then as we tried to set dates, it's whittled itself down to about 10 to 15. I've been going to the city council meeting on Monday. I'm emailing people directly. We've been able to get some staff and students. I'm doing some work with the students. They've been, Sarah and Mark just left, but I was meeting with them today and they're helping me pull together student groups to give input, which is great. I'm working with Tim Smith to bring together a business group with Liz Gamache helping to facilitate that. But we're starting our listening sessions on the 17th and we're going to November 7th and we're having a hard time getting people to do it. And I understand how everyone's busy. It just, when it comes, people are really excited and then, oh, I've got this or I've got that. And so I'm imploring your help to really reach out to folks, or yourself to join one of the listening sessions to give input. So this is not uncommon. From what I know about community engagement, it really starts one-on-one. And you have to, and that's you have to really go to people and ask them to take part and find out what they can do. So if you could help with that, that would be great. So, and if you need the templates again, I can send those out.
All right, we received an email regarding this request, and should you send it to us again just to put it on everyone's hit parade?
That's what I was saying there at the end, Nilda. I think we talked over each other that I'd make sure that gets back out again tomorrow to everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
With the scheduled listening sessions?
So here's what we're trying not to do. I can say when they are, but we really like people to contact us. It's in working with our consultants. We'd really like people to contact us. There's some concerns we have if we publish when and where they're happening.
Are there any virtual sessions possible?
So right now, it's going to be best face-to-face.
Yeah.
So that's what we're working on.
Okay.
That doesn't mean
All right.
we'll go there.
Okay. It's convenient.
I understand that.
Thanks, Bill. I'm going to move us along a little bit here because we're later. Next item under old business is setting goals. How you doing, Grant?
Good. The goals are sort of just run sort of part and parcel to the listening sessions that Bill was just talking about. So I don't think there's much more on that topic. We can keep going.
Okay. And Bill, we had talked a little bit preemptively about this, and we're talking also about incorporating some of the envisioning planning in some of the goal setting. Is that something we need to talk about right now or save that for a bit?
I think when we get down to item F,
okay,
we can get to that.
All right, next item on the agenda is the Esp Negotiation Committee. So we have Jack and Joanna who have confirmed that they want to participate. It would be nice to have a third person. Anyone interested that wants to speak up now? All right, well, you don't lose the opportunity to speak up later, so you can get in touch with me a little bit later and let me know that you're dying to be on this committee. Under item G, professional staff, I've heard from Nina and myself. We're both interested. Grant and Susan have been interested in the past. I don't know if either or both of them are interested in continuing that process. Grant?
I won't be able to do it this year.
Okay, Susan?
I was going to say, I'll do it if Grant does it.
Okay, that's no fair. You can't do that.
I'll do it.
Thank you. All right, next item on the agenda is item E, and I totally own this and I'm tabling it, superintendent evaluation. Next item is item F is the wrap up from the board retreat. And this would be the collective moral imperative for the board. So I'm going to turn this over to you, Bill, to help guide me through this.
So I thought we had a great retreat a couple weeks ago, and with the help of Phil, we took everything that you had put up on those chart papers of your individual imperative, moral imperative, and really said, what's your why as a board, a collective why, and did some color coding of different words, as you can see the colors there. And then after looking at all those themes, Phil and I went back and forth a couple times. I think Nina and Nilda, you were involved in that, at least CCing those emails. We went back and forth and really wrote a proposed statement for you, which is on the back, that Maple Run School Board believes that it's our moral imperative to ensure that all students are safe and truly belong in our educational community so they can learn and grow throughout their pre-K-12 career and beyond. And that's the proposal that I'm saying to you. I also put on there the leadership team's theory of action. After seeing all that and Phil and I kind of writing, it was like, oh, there's some real commonalities here. And where Nilda was going earlier is, I think until we hear from the community and set goals with the community, this could, if the alignment between these two, and there may be some wordsmithing you want to do on that proposed moral imperative, but I see some big commonalities between them to say those are the goals and that the that the board wants to make sure we're tracking, which are around that safe, that belonging, and learning. And if that were the case, then I would design a reporting system and bring that to you to the next meeting that we're in those 3 areas and work that with the leadership team so that we can give you evidence in those areas. I'm kind of pushing you a little further forward. I feel like I'd be a little bit more directive as your superintendent, but I just wanted to really be concrete and point that out from what I saw.
Well, those are clearly the themes that came up. I know I missed the retreat, but I read through the info, and if anything, I mean, safety comes up always, belonging and some of those words that mean the same thing, you know, come up a lot. So, you know, maybe we can work with that to get something in front of us that we can react to. So I would certainly support you building a reporting process that would help guide us through this. Because I feel like sometimes we're a little bit paralyzed by the, what's that word? Paralysis by analysis or something, where we're too busy trying to figure it all out that we haven't ended up with a product.
And I feel some the same way, Nilda. You and I have talked about that I'd like to have something that, and I know I talked to Grant a little bit about this when we were saying what's the time period for the goals committee, and we talked about that in the goals committee subcommittee, that I think with the work the board did here, it kind of says, until that comes from this may be what the community comes up with, but you know, until we have that, let's use something.
Agreed. Does anyone have any objections to how this conversation is going?
I don't think I have an objection. Can you just restate the 3? I see safety, I see belonging.
And then so that it's if it were in the theory of action language, Joanna, the outcome of they learn and grow is the 3rd, the learning and the growing.
So belonging, safety, and learning.
Yeah.
Okay.
The only thing, if I might, the only thing I see on here is I feel like is the word feel is missing, right?
Yeah.
So like it's one thing to say they're safe and belong, but I think we should be pushing for the idea that these children feel safe and they feel like they belong. And I think it's easy for us as adults maybe sometimes to say, oh no, you're safe, or no, you're fine. But I think it's important for us to highlight the fact that we want students here to have that feeling and to feel, and that doesn't have to be the word feel maybe, but just an idea that it's more, we have to have the perception of what students, the students' perception in our schools is important and should really be the highlight for us maybe. That's the only thing I see that I think could be changed on it.
Okay, thanks, Ryder.
I support that.
Yeah, I know that's in our climate assessment system. So.
So we've kind of gotten through 7F. Now we're going to move on to new business.
So, Nilda, do you want to? Yeah, Grant had a good question here, so I'm going to let you state it.
Do we need a board action for Bill to take further action on this topic? Should we make a motion to?
I guess it wouldn't hurt.
So my question to Ryder, because I saw a lot of nodding of heads, and I heard Joanna outwardly because she was remote. Expressing that feel. I always try not to wordsmith at a table because it's never a good thing to do. If I were going to do that, ensure that all students feel they are safe and truly belong. Something like that.
Yeah, I think that's good.
But I could bring that back to you next time along with a report, and the board could take action. Because I want the board to really, I think it's important for you as a board to take an action like this is our collective moral imperative that you agree with that as a board. I can bring that back next time along with a draft of a report.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think one of the words that you had used in the past was the evidence of belonging too. So evidence could be what Ryder says is a feel, or there could be evidence that is in another form. Correct?
Yes, I think that, well, that's why I was just saying to Ryder, I can go either way on it, Then I'll look for where the board wants to go.
So, Grant, I would like, if you could, can you make a motion for us?
Well, or do we, sounds like we should make that motion at the next meeting, once we have the wording back from Bill. I mean, if I were to move that we adopt this, I believe we would vote no. And I think that's how that works. So if we need to go through that, then we can.
Can we direct the superintendent to move forward on whatever
I don't need a direction to move forward to bring you a reporting calendar next time in to edit this. What I think is important is that the board adopts a collective moral imperative. So you're making a statement as a board. This is what we believe. This is why we're here. That's what we were talking about in the retreat.
Okay, so should we adopt the moral imperative at this meeting or be prepared to do it at the next meeting?
Why don't you let me revise it based on what I just kind of verbalized here, and I'll bring that back, and if anyone sees it, I'll share it with the board, and if anyone has a question about my wording, email me ahead of time. I can add that wording by Friday and get it back to you, and if you have a question, please just send it back to me.
And Aaron, let's try to make sure that gets on the agenda for an action next week at the next meeting. Thank you. Thanks for bringing that up, Grant. Appreciate it. All right, so we're up to new business, early retirement. And Bill, do you want to start this or do you want me to start this?
If you could start it, that would be great for the teachers that are listed there.
All right, so I would make a motion to approve the early retirement with a full benefit amount for the following. Jill Boomhover, Catherine Cameron Musente, Sally Lawyer, Joanne McCoy, Adam Vincelet, and Paula White. Can I have that motion?
So moved.
Second. Is there a second? Good. Any discussion related to the motion for the early retirement for those teachers?
Yeah, I just have a question. What do they mean by early retirement? They're not ready for retirement? I'm not sure what that means, and I retire.
Okay, so there's a side letter provision in the professional agreement that allows for a number of teachers to request retirement in advance of their usual time frame and be bought out for that package. And it's usually put in as part of negotiations. It usually covers a period of time. It could cover 1, 2, 3, 4 years. I can't remember what time frame this one covers, but I believe this is the last year of whatever one has been negotiated right now. So this gives the opportunity for a handful of teachers. It's usually, is it usually 5?
Up to 8.
Up to 8. Okay, and it's usually part of a process that we go through to try to, reduce the number of expensive teachers without compromising the district, right? We want to create a balance so that we're not losing too many experienced teachers. And this is the last opportunity for this particular process to take place under currently negotiated contracts.
Okay, thank you.
Can I say that correctly, Bill?
Yes, I think it's probably mistitled. It's always been called early retirement. It's probably more early notification of retirement.
So they'll finish up
They finish up the year.
Okay.
But they have to notify us by October
1st.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's what this is.
I didn't know if they were leaving, like.
No.
Thank you, Nilda.
No, sorry. So based on that, I need to take a roll vote. So Peter?
Yes?
Katie?
Yes.
Grant?
Yes.
Jack?
Yes.
Al?
Yes.
Pryor?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Joanna? Yes. Nina?
Yes.
And Nilda says yes. So motion carries. Thank you. And then Bill, along with the early retirement?
Yes.
Notification?
I wanted to share with you a letter that I received and the board received. It's in your packet from Principal Joan Cavallo. Joan has been, I believe, 15 years as a city school principal. It's a tremendous length of service to the students of the city of St. Albans, and I aspire to that length of service. I don't think I'll ever make it because of when I plan to be done. At any institution, doing 15 years is incredible. And I really congratulate Joan on that. I know that she put a lot of thought into this, and she's announcing to the board, and she wants to make sure that she announces early so there's a thorough search process. I will tell you that as we're announcing it here, Joan will be informing her staff right at the same time as we're doing this right now. We wanted to really coordinate that, so it came out once all together. And on Friday, I will be emailing the city school staff, letting them know the process, but you saw the process last year that we used for Fairfield. It's going to be the same process, and most likely Casey Provost, our HR director, Casey has not heard this from me. He's unfortunately been out the past couple of days, but I'm sure he knows where I'm going, is that he'll be leading the first part of the process. We'll have a multi-step that has representation from the parents / community, students, and staff. And we'll start facilitating that process. Our plan is to probably do a posting late November, beginning of December. That if we're out too early, we won't get people, and we'll actually having to restart it doesn't help our advertising campaign, so it's really good to be out almost right after Thanksgiving. To start posting and then really starting the process of doing all the interviewing and everything right after we get back from winter break. So I want to again say to Joan, I'm just so impressed with the years of service that she's provided City School and the students of St. Albans, and she is one of the most high student advocates that I know, especially for students that need extra support.
Big shoes to fill.
Yeah.
Thank you. Do we need to take action on?
No, you don't need to take action on it. I just thought it was appropriate that it was right here.
Nina, can you take the next two items, please? I'm going to step off the computer for just a second.
Yep, no problem. An unpaid leave request, attachment 8B. Can I say the name?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's for Kristen Corrigan, BFA teacher. So need a motion. The administration seeks a motion to approve the unpaid leave request for Kristen Corrigan as presented. Need a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Does administration support this?
Totally support it.
Okay.
Yep. Kristen's a great teacher that we have here in the building, and this is a leave for an expected child.
Okay. Any more? Okay. So we take a roll call as to approve this. Written down. Peter.
Yes.
Jack.
Yes.
Susan. Yes. Grant.
Yes.
Katie.
Yes.
Ryer.
Yes.
Al.
Yes.
Joanna.
Yes.
Nilda, is she back? Nilda? Okay. Nina, yes. It passes. Thank you. All right. Next one is non-discriminatory mascot and school branding policy. It could be a possible action on attachment 8C.
So I can give some context to this
Please,
first.
yes, thank you.
This past year, the legislature passed a law stating that every school district in Vermont has to, and independent school has to have a policy on non-discriminating mascots and school branding. So this is the template policy that came from the work of the legislature, so Joint Legal and Vermont School Boards Association and the Agency of Education. They always get together when a new law is passed and write the draft template. Gave you the template unchanged from them. So if tonight this would be a first reading of this, and then if it would move to a second reading, Aaron would post it for public comment and we move forward. So this is one by law that we have to take. You can adjust it and make it more strict, but you can't make it any less strict.
We just wanted to motion that for
Yeah, I just think it's always good to motion that you had a first reading.
Okay. So the administration seeks a motion to warn the non-discriminatory mascot and school branding policy as the first reading to possibly adopted this policy at the next board meeting on November 2nd, 2022. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second?
So moved.
Whoops.
Second. Third, whatever.
All right.
You got that.
All right. Any discussion?
I just have, so I
Sure.
had the opportunity to testify on this, the S-139, and it was really important, and I think it's an important thing to look at, and I especially think it's important because, unfortunately, of the 4 reps that represent us, I looked at the Senate numbers and I couldn't find the Senate, but the 4 reps that represent Maple Run, 3 of them voted against it. So now that's really. This is just this just says we don't have racist things in our schools, and I think it falls in line with the like need to have a welcoming place for all students. So I think it's really important for us as a board to we have to approve it, right? I mean, it's the law, we have to approve it, but I do think it's important for us as a board to approve it, and make sure that we send a message that in our schools we don't want racist imagery, and we're not going to support, the idea behind racism, discrimination in general. So.
What was the number of that bill again?
S-139, and I looked up the Senate. That the Senate did a voice vote, so I can't tell you how the Senate voted.
Thanks, Ryan. Any other discussion, comments? Any discussion, comments online? Okay. All right, so we'll go ahead and take a roll call to move this to a second reading for November 2nd. Peter?
Yes.
Jack?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Graham?
Yes.
Katie?
Yes.
Al?
Yes.
Joanna?
Yes.
Nina, yes. Nilda?
Yes.
Ryer.
Oh, Ryan, I'm sorry,
That's right.
Ryan.
Yes.
You said your piece. You took it.
Sorry,
She was gonna say.
Saved yours.
Sorry.
It was assumed.
Yeah, no, I just wrote it down, I'm sorry, Ryan. My bad.
That's fun.
9-0, yeah. Motion passes 9-0. Nilda, back to you.
Thank you. All right, item 9, other business warrants. Seek a motion to approve the warrants, acknowledging that passage of this motion will act as authorization and signature of any individual board members participating remotely. Can I have that motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you all. I think I have a second. Any discussion? All right, let's take a roll. Breyer.
Yes.
Katie.
Yes. 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 Yes.
Grant.
Yes.
Jack.
Yes.
Al.
Yes.
Did I say Breyer already?
Yes.
She feels bad.
Okay, then I'm going to say Peter.
Yes.
Susan.
Yes.
Joanna. Yes. Nina.
Yes.
Gilda says yes. Motion carries for passing the warrants. Next item is superintendent's report. Bill, do you have anything you'd like to add? Or?
Yes, I do. I have 4 things. Just because I was quiet earlier. First, you may have all received an email from Vermont School Board Association having to look at, asking about where you are with governance standards. They're in the proposed new version of education quality standards. If you haven't seen them, they're actually pretty good. The work that the governance subcommittee did last spring is in alignment with these, I believe. And Jack and Nina and I met to go over those, to hopefully bring those governance standards to a first reading at the next meeting for this board. So I think there's a link in this week's weekly update from Vermont School Board Association if you want to look at that. The second thing with VSBA, I've got 2 VSBA items. There are resolutions that will be passed at they're up for adoption at the annual meeting that Jack will be attending for this group. You might want to look, there's a link in the VSBA weekly update. If there's anything there of concern, you might want to let Jack know. He's your representative. I know for our neighbors just to north, Missisquoi Valley has part of the resolution there on tech centers. It's very important to them because they have a branch tech center right now for agriculture, and they're not approved anymore because of some of the way the Agency of Education is working, and this resolution is to help them out. So I actually support what they're trying to do. Mrs. Goy, I think it's a good thing. I think we don't have to, a tech center doesn't have to be within a building. Let's just put it that way. This next one I wanted to let you know about at the next meeting. I said I'd bring you a calendar report, but the next meeting, and Polly and Sarah referenced it earlier, I'd like to have Andrea and Martha here to talk to you about Act 173 and the changes to special education. We're getting into budget season. It would be good for you all to hear. There's some changes in funding happening with Act 173. It's called block grant. We're no longer in a reimbursement model. Not just the funding piece, as well as what's it doing programmatically for students. And Polly and Sarah did a great job of covering a lot of that tonight. So they got a lot of that programming piece. And the last thing, and this, I want to make you aware of something, because we're going to do something that might hit the community and sound strange. We use math materials that are both electronic and in print. And the math teacher selected this program. We, as you know, during the pandemic, updated ourselves so every student has a one-to-one device. And the program comes with a one-to-one device program to get the online. The publisher requires that we take delivery of the print materials, and it's all the consumables, and we do it online. For those kids who need the consumables, because they have to be on paper, we use those. But it's literally pallets worth of stuff that's sitting in our schools right now. We're going to recycle it. We'll take care of it properly, dispose of it properly for kids that need it. We're not going to get rid of so many that if, hey, a new kid needs it, we'll have plenty of copies. But I just don't want someone seeing us taking pallets of what look like soft cover books out and say, what's the school doing, getting rid of all this? And when you go into the recycling stream, a lot of people see it, and they know where it came from. So I wanted you as a board, normally I wouldn't come to you with something like this, but I just wanted you to be apprised that if someone says, hey, what's the school doing throwing out pallets worth of books? We're not throwing out pallets worth of books. We had to take them. We didn't want them. And John actually told the publisher, when we go to look at a math program, if you continue to make us do it, we will not be selecting your program, because we don't believe in the way you're requiring us to take all these paper consumables.
So because you bought this mathematics program, they also made you take these pallets worth of books
of workbooks, basically.
That you're only going to keep some of the kids that are.
They need it, and the rest of them are going to go.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to warn you. John and I were talking, and I said, hey, we got a board meeting next Wednesday. Let me just say this to the board, so if someone comes up to you, did you know that the school got rid of pallets worth of books? Like, yeah, I did. There's a story. There's a good reason behind it. So normally I wouldn't bother you, but.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
We appreciate that. Any board announcements?
Jack's got one.
Hey, Jack.
So, Ryer, do you mind if I tell the board about your reset award?
If you want to, you don't have to. It's not that important.
Well, I think it was. There was a state meeting to honor Patrick Leahy's retirement of the Democratic Party, and there were 3 awards given out at that meeting, and Ryer received the honoring extraordinary Vermont Democrats who are leading the way forward. You know, his work on civil rights and other issues that he, and his leadership, he's on several committees, state committees and local committees, and I just thought it was great. I happened to be there, so I thought that was.
Congratulations, Ryan.
Andy Klobuchar was there.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And so he got a picture taken with Patrick Leahy, Marcel Leahy, Amy Klobuchar, and there was Ryan. So I thought that was phenomenal.
Excellent. Thanks for bringing that up, Jack. Appreciate it. Any other board announcements?
Yeah, thank you, Jack. Congratulations, Ryan.
Okay, agenda items for future meetings. We have our list. Potential executive session, not tonight. Before we adjourn, I just want to advise you guys that we've had a couple of meetings kind of spring up, and when we send that doodle poll out, it's really important for you to answer as best you can, because we were struggling a little bit with a possible quorum issue for tomorrow night. It's been resolved, so we're good for tomorrow night, but just as a cautionary tale, when we send those out, we're really looking for people to really look at their calendars, because sometimes a half hour makes a difference as to whether we can have a quorum or not. So just an advisement on that. Hearing no other info. Yes, sir.
On that same vein, we will have the need for another board hearing very, very soon. I can't go into it. I can't take you in executive session and go into it. I just need to say I'm going to need you available very, very soon.
Right, and these things pop up. We don't have a lot of control over them, but they're time-based, okay? So we're required by law to meet within a certain time frame, which is why we're pushing you to try to get these meetings on the books.
And they are all available online, right? Like if we have to meet.
If you need to be,
right.
If you need to be, you can do online. You will need to be in a very secure location.
Okay.
This is
right.
executive
But if you
session.
if you have to do that, we'll make sure it works.
Okay.
Excuse me, Nilda, can you just go over who do you have on the docket for tomorrow night, please?
I'm going to have to defer to Bill.
I'm getting the list right now, so I don't guess. Or
You can actually add me. I'll be able to make that meeting now. So.
sure, or you can read
You
it.
read
I
it.
don't care. I know you don't like to read it.
It's all good. So we have Susan, Jack, Grant, Nilda, Al, and Katie.
And Ryan.
No, right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Hearing no further business, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you all for your participation.
Thank you all.
Thank you.